Okay, so I'd like to kind of end our discussion of the head by looking at some more extreme views, just the um, beneath and then above. And I want to impress also the kind of the useful nature of this approach, and that I don't have to change it in order to see any type of view that's more extreme. So the big difference here to be aware of is that in setting up that initial sphere, right, with the tilt and all of that, that the uh, ellipse for the eye line gets really high. That's pretty ugly. Let's try that again. Right, so this is going to be really high, representing the brow line, but then remember, I'm always thinking around, and that we should have that same consistency where this ellipse sits at the equatorial center. It's all the way around. And so what I'm trying to think of when doing this is just rotating the sphere spatially, up or down. If I can find that, then I'll place my chin. So the difference here that we already discussed a little bit is for an under view, the chin can move up in or towards the sphere. So you're going to lose that 2/3, 1/3 proportion. This also gives you a nice plane that's reminiscent of a cylinder. So something you can exaggerate to push that quality of space here. But then from this point forward, it's just the exact same. If I can find the brow and the chin, halfway is still, for me, the base of the nose. Halfway again is the sockets. Halfway again is the keystone. Thirds for mouth or lips, and then chin. Target or cutout. Where's your hairline or temple? I'm sorry, your brow or temple. Hairline here is going to be, very much near the top, if not in line with the top of the skull or shape. Bring that around. Back of the head, base of the nose, right? Keeping all these curves or arcs consistent to one another. And then I could find my 4 points, split it or cut it off. So now here's my elliptical side plane. Cut that in half, top to bottom and side to side. And now I have a better placement for the ear. Remember, this ear here was just me laying in a basic shape so that I could sight where the brow would fall to and help determine if I was under or over. But now I could say, all right, well, this is a better idea for where the ear should be. You can make a C curve, or like I'm doing here, try to get that person's shape a bit more specific. Once I find the ear, this gives me at least the beginning for where I want to find the start of the jaw. So I'm thinking of this jaw coming down and then to the chin. And if you want, you can kind of continue here that drop. So here's our jaw. I'm going to try to stretch this so it feels like there's a bit more pull to it. And that'll give a nice contrast maybe to the back if I give or use more of a C curve. Um, Now we're on to setting up the jaw. And so let's do the more complicated one, and maybe on the down view, we could do the opposite. Find the opening for the ear, create your eyeglass or the frame for the glasses here, and then you could develop rhythms. This is going to point up and towards the temple. This one I'm aiming to put near the mouth. And then I put in my Z, right? So here's the start of the Z, comes down, and then the Z continues into the jaw. So what I like, again, for this, even though we've mentioned it before, is I think these planes are helpful to me when I do start to think about adding shadow or constructing out other placements of muscle. Right? Like the masseter would be something I could visualize in accordance with those planes. Once I get this, I'm going to put in my brow. You can go with the single visor or with folding 3 planes. So I'll do the 3. So going across the center, you're trying to use this symmetry line as a guide up against the structure of the socket that I've made. Work my way over and think about the addition of the keystone here. And then if I found this, I usually take that in any 3/4 view and then try to copy it or give something close. It doesn't have to be perfect or it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but I usually start with it being pretty close so that it has that sense of perspective continuity. And that's one thing, you're just putting in the brow. One thing worth keeping in mind, right, is that if we're trying to describe complex perspectives, and the head is, I do think of it as simple planes or a box. And so this corner is representing this corner. So what will happen, I think, commonly when I see people starting with this process is I'm trying to keep all of the features consistent across. And it's common that they would start to go different ways, or you lose a little bit of the consistency in your parallel lines. And that can kind of rupture or give your heads a feeling of distortion. So I do try to keep all of these, even though there's an arc or a curve to them, pretty consistent. And that's why I would look less for specific contour here, at least at the start, to just favor something that matches the other side more so. Let's put in our cheek. So, one thing I always try to do is before moving into features, work across, especially on figure or symmetrical form. I want to see the effective decision on the other side. So here would be the design of that structure for the jaw and then the cheek. And then all that's really left to do here is put in the nose. But this is the part that's worth pointing out as something unique and different because we've only looked so far at conservative perspectives. The good news is you can do the same exact thing. Um, the difficult part is that you have to just be a little bit more careful with how you do it. So for example, in this, here's the base of the nose, but now the tip of the nose is in line with the bottom of the eye. So in this, I put maybe my first, let's get a better idea of the sockets, but that tip of the nose is going to go almost all the way up here. And so you just have to be more careful with where you're sighting the structure for the end of the nose. So let's say it's like here. Okay. But I can go right back to business as usual. This is going to get brought back. This is going to get brought back. Now I have all of this plane that I can start to work the details of the cartilage into. I see all the things that we've discussed are added in. It's just more of it now because that plane's revealing more. This part, right? So it still has to connect to the keystone, but I'm just going to put it in as a square or as one plane that I can later come in and customize or make more organic. I'm going to drop this down, the side plane from the saddle to the cheek line, and then that's also going to drop here. And now you have your basic consistent design for the structure of your nose. So this would be the underplane here. In thinking of the eyes, I would do the same thing, try to find this inside spiraling plane, especially now since I'm looking up, I'm seeing a lot more into this. So with that, you can see I'm just taking this corner point for where the nose is and then echoing the larger design of the socket or that eyeglass. But one thing I do a lot for underviews like this is when I place the eye, so let's get a light sphere. So this is where I'm thinking of the corner of the eye. If I want to help in sighting, I use the center of the eye to find the corner of the mouth or vice versa. Here's my sphere for the eye. And so one thing I'm going to do now is in placing the sphere, just try to tuck it behind the socket more. So I'm thinking of this as behind that line. Or if we do the same thing on this side, right, laying in the sphere, then behind. So when moving into the description of the eyelid, this will be a helpful reminder. Right? So the lower lid is going to go this way. And that's consistent with all the perspective discussed so far. And then the upper lid, so tie that there, comes up and over. And that's also consistent with the description of the perspective. And then all you have to do is just kind of put in your pupil and iris, just concentric circles normally. That gives you your gaze. But then as far as lighting goes, this plane will be helpful, right? Seeing that there's more so here, more perspective. Okay, the other side would be the same, just more overlap. So let's just leave this one undeveloped so you can see the starting point and then what I built towards or to. But let's put in an idea for that plane as well. Okay, so last thing is to kind of consider the mouth and then the chin. Let's see if we can visualize or find the denture sphere. So it kind of frames in this area, framed in this area, and then what is the effect of that addition? Well, it's going to push out the zone or the structure of the mouth. And then are there opportunities for rhythm? Can you tie in with gesture curves and those relationships we built on the first week, right, to the mouth? And then under that, chin. So between the different parts or aspects of the face in a view like this, there's much more overlap. And that's clear in the eye or the nose, the cheek, and then the relationship to the mouth and the chin. Kind of consistent with a landscape, right? So this effect. Just overlapping things in hopefully a clearer way so that the view becomes evident. If we're going to do the mouth, it would be the same, right? So I'm trying to push, just like the eyelids, first the character or the nature of the surface to which the lips are going to wrap, something like that. And then I can give the lips their character or their thickness by altering the specific nature of the M and the W, if that was a helpful way to think about it. And then the same thing would be on the bottom. Use that center point to the lip to push this same perspective feel. And then we're on to the chin. And you can see how the light is, even the light, right, moves in more or less the same way as an echo of that form and its perspective. So there we have the underview. You can see it's all the same in terms of steps. The benefit is you don't have to learn anything new or alter your process to depict a more challenging perspective. You just have to look for subtle variations in the way that you set it up to push the camera a bit more. In this case, it really began or started with seeing the tip of the nose in a slightly different area. Okay, so let's do the underside or the top-down view. So just jump down here. And so I think I'll be able to do this one pretty quickly since we're now so comfortable with the approach. Brow, chin, proportions, all the same proportions I can use. Hairline, which in this one is going to be here, let's say. And I'm thinking that all the way around. Right, so again, looking for where the top would be rounded and then become sharp. Temple, say it's here. And also cut off some of the big balloon shape on that side too. Back of the head, base of the nose. Here would be our cutout. Split it. So now this is the strong suggestion of box, just in terms of how we're thinking the plane changes. Split it vertically, place your ear. And once I have the ear, then I try to sight the shape of the skull, sometimes a little bit clearer. So like now I can see that the skull would need to be brought into here, which is fine. Jaw. And then maybe I can here double check the size of the chin. So every step again, it's just that continual process of refining. Cheek, let's just do our Loomis cheek so you can see some contrast. Top of the ear, one arcing rhythm to the corner of the chin. And then I would want to think this, if I can, from the other side. Maybe something like that. So let's pull this down a little bit. And then now we can think about the sockets. So nothing changes. The only difference is the sockets would be built on that line instead of one that would be curved the other way or straight. And so here we would have the drop back, make my planes. Right, so if I'm having it move like this, I could still kind of carve in the planes of the sockets to match that. So that go like this, right up against that cheek structure, cross. Right, now with this, I can give myself a better idea of where the forehead is. So this gets to go away, or we can cut that out. Keystone. And then dramatic difference, again, is, and this is important, once I have the base of the nose, I'm always going to drop the tip or the end in views where the camera is above. So like if I sight where the end of the nose is, it's down here. Right? But in pushing that point, now I know I'm above, but also I'm judging that line based off of the symmetry of the face. Right? So the symmetry line, which is there, the tip of the nose is over there. So that suggests the turn or creates the turn. And do the same thing. Bring this back up to determine the width or how wide you want your nose, and then create the same types of lines up. Now this would be the front of the nose. Drop this down. And now you have a basic generic structure for the nose that you can modify. For the eyes, same thing. Just lay in a couple of spheres here. Overlap them so that they feel tucked into the socket. In terms of setting up our dentrosphere or our mouth, put that here. So that's the basic form. You don't have to draw it all the way through. I just kind of suggest it there towards the bottom, where it's a little bit darker, and then as it moves up towards the face, I get it lighter. But here's that idea of wedging form or trying to build a rhythmic relationship between them. Because I'm sweeping these cheek lines into the sphere or the form of the mouth. And then the last thing is, again, in this top-down view, the opposite of what we just did, I'm trying to suggest all of the forms overlapping, receding away. So my cheek goes right in here. And I'm just going to fix just the end of the nose there, just to bring it back in line with the overall perspective somewhat. So this would be again the end of the cartilage, and then we could swing up and design our nostril right there. Let's get a little tighter in. Eyes, same exact thing. You could structure your eyelids, but in this type of view, I would use that as an opportunity to re-encourage the perspective of the overall. Same thing here. Use that. And basically just saying you're seeing more of the top of the eyelid. And then I would soften all this structure with any kind of more organic element, like the eyebrow. And then the last thing, just to be a little bit darker so we can pull out some of the attributes of the features more. Here would be the lips. And then with this, I want to follow that perspective setup with the denture sphere. Set up the corner for the mouth. And then try to do the same thing on this side. And then any type of perspective, I just make the M or Cupid's bow thinner on top. And then I'd make it a little bit fuller for the bottom, just so we feed into that difference of perspective angle. Is that this? I'm also trying to get that sweep, showing less of the underside here of the jaw or the mouth. And then overlapping. I pull out that T for the chin a bit more. And let's do the same thing just for the eye also. And this is what I'd start to do on a later stage, in terms of, let's say you're drawing with pen or something that's less forgiving than Photoshop, where you can use layers. I do focus on working light to dark, always. A lighter touch, and then get as much structure or setup as I need, and then slowly start to move into a more confident line once I'm feeling good about where the setup is and what I understand about it. And so here's the eyebrow. And then we could do the same thing in terms of just placing the gaze. All right, so I mean, just to give you an idea of what I'm doing, I usually just try to push the two spheres, so the iris and the pupil, um, in consistent placement over the sphere. But I always do draw through socket. And then what would kind of help clean this up some more is adding some of the fat that Scott talks about in his portrait class, which you do a much better job describing than me. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of how I'd work through all the different poses and bring this approach to communicate different views of the face, study perspective, see different planes, and that's it.